welcome back to the MHR podcast. I'm Alice.
And I'm Andy.
And this week, Andy, I thought that we would have a little discussion about an article I found.
Okay.
Which it basically discusses the idea that career stability may be a thing of the past.
Okay, interesting. I suppose we've talked about that a bit, haven't we, before, in terms of like different expectations of careers? Like Gen Zers have a different view than maybe older generations on their career.
Yes.
Or expectations in the workplace. So are we talking about the stability for an employee, or are we talking about what expectations an employee has of how long they should be there? Or are we talking about both?
Yes.
Okay,
and
I
think it is. I think it does kind of allude to both because, like you say, every generation will have a shift and change in what their expectations are of the workplace.
Yeah.
But on top of that, we're also looking at the times of changing and what impact that's having kind of the opposite way. So what is it that's driving the change?
Well, Gen Z workers are expected to change their career 3 times more than any other generation. And that's 3 times more, not 3 times. 3 times more. There are certain generations that never expected to change their career or their job, right?
Yeah, it's true.
And I think, so as a millennial, right, I expected to change mine quite a few times, but I also expected some longevity so I could kind of show kind of growth and kind of like development, right?
Yeah.
But I do think, is it like, the average is about like, what, maybe 2-3 years at the moment, just before you should be changing?
Yeah.
So that to me seems shorter than what I expected when I came into the world of work.
Yeah, and it's interesting because obviously you spoke about that longevity and what your expectations were. And I won't say there's that many years between us, but...
There are. There are, in fact,
couple.
quite a few years.
Maybe a decade.
Just 10. Just 10. A nice round number of 10 years. So not many, just 10.
But a difference.
Yeah, okay.
But what I was told, especially actually at university, was it's better for your career development to change every 2 to 3 years. And that might not just actually be companies, but your career path. So try different types of jobs. So you're actually actively encouraged to go and explore different industries, different type of jobs.
It rings true. I mean, just before lockdown, I changed my job about 3 times during a space of about 5 years, right? And I actually found I advanced a lot quicker by changing. I'm not saying everyone should, but I think the market was reflective of that at the time, and I learned that. And I had been somewhere for a substantial amount of time. I was quite young. I was in my early 20s, and I had been somewhere 4 or 5 years, which is quite long for that period of time at that stage of my life.
Yeah.
I think typically you find that as the older you get and the more established you are in your career, you might stay somewhere a bit longer because you've kind of made inroads and actually you've found a place that maybe fits your culture and you want to bed down a bit and you want that security, you want that stability because I know you're starting a family or you've got a mortgage or you're going, I like where I live and I like the company, it works for me, I like that balance. But I think when you're younger, especially as a younger generation, if you're a Gen Z coming in, you're still at a kind of fluctuating point in your life.
Definitely.
And you probably don't have the expectation of the stability that you might need from a long-term thing. You're looking at going, what can I do now that in 1, 2, 3 years I can use to go to there or there? And I think that's just part of that career ladder, which I think is a standard for every generation, right?
I think so. And kind of what you mentioned there was the idea that they have the freedom to move. Gen Z that are coming into the workplace, they have that freedom to move about, to try new things, to explore. So ultimately, are we saying that career stability is a thing of the past, or actually is it repeating pattern? It's just maybe it's a lot more chopped and changed because, like we said in previous podcasts, a big challenge for HR is actually recruitment and retention of employees. We've mentioned that a lot in already this year, but is it an actual reflection of the time we have, or like I say, is it just a pattern?
I think it's a bit of both, isn't it? It must be a bit of both. And this is a very broad debate, and we're not going to get over it in about, the 12 minutes that we're going to talk about it today, right? But, I just think reflecting on things that we've talked about a lot this year, it's not that companies and employers want it to be unstable. They want stability because stability you can rely on. You can predict stability, and it's cheaper to be stable. We know it costs a lot to hire, right?
Definitely.
And also, it's employees market. Still is out there. It's very hard in a competitive market to get the right talent. So you want to hold on to it. And what employers don't want to do is lose that valuable talent that they've retained and grown over the years. Because as soon as they leave, you can raise a like-for-like role, but you're losing years of experience in the company that know how the company works. You have to train that up. You can't get that from another company unless it's very similar, right? So I think it probably is a thing of the past, the stability as we know it, but it's not necessarily what employers want. What employers are doing is recognising that they're losing staff for SI and centre, it's an employee's market and it's hard to recruit. So stability is hard because it's driven very much by an employee need to want to go, well, actually, everyone wants me anyway.
Yeah.
It's very competitive. I'm kind of in charge now, so I can afford to jump and change. Whereas I actually remember a time in the world of work where I was like, okay, I can't afford to just leave because I would really struggle to get another job. I don't know what other opportunities are.
Yeah.
I came into the world of work in like 2008, 2009, and there was an economic crisis, and I was worried about ever getting a job, because I didn't think there was many jobs going and loads of businesses were shutting down. I think that's very different now. People go, actually, I can get a job anywhere, and it's, I can get loads of offers. So I think the stability problem is created by an employee market, maybe.
And no, I think I would agree with that actually, and it's definitely a massive challenge for HR, the recruitment market as it is. But what's interesting is I think maybe people's expectations of what their job should provide them, what's offered to them, is chopping and changing. It must be so rapid now because there's almost a greater awareness of what their career could hold. But on the flip side, you made an interesting point about that longevity. So we speak about it chopping and changing the recruitment market and kind of being that candidate's market. But it's an interesting question for companies about how much do they value the longevity of the employees that they do currently have.
Yeah.
And we speak about, ways to retain the employees that you already have. But it's almost important to remember, what do you mean by longevity? Are we talking 5 years now? Are we talking 20 years?
Yeah.
Maybe that is quite a difference between the generations because, like, see, when you have kind of an older generation in the workplace who have been there 15, 20 years, they probably are satisfied, they have that job security and that's what they need. Yeah. And then you have this younger generation coming in with these demands. Yeah. And it's a balancing act, isn't it, for companies?
And it usually means a lot of change, and change can sometimes feel expensive, or we can worry about change being expensive because we implement new processes or ways of being. But actually, you've got to recognise that maybe that change leads to a better productivity. Yeah. Also, different industries. The different industries have a completely different view and landscape on what longevity should be like. Certain, you're talking. I think there's industries like retail and hospitality and entertainment and the cultural sector are driven by a younger talent base who work harder, longer hours, and then there's a higher churn rate because they're not expected to stay long.
No.
And also, especially in hospitality, it's harder in that sense. And I think there's just an inbred expectation that you move around and you move that way. Like, you're not supposed to be there that long. Whereas other places, you might look at whether it's software, whether it's anything in terms of professional services or consultancy. Like, you are there longer because your wisdom is your power, right? The longer you're here, the more experience you have, the more you can offer the organisation. So you're seen as that kind of font of wisdom. But you're talking about industries that are very kind of cerebral, right?
Yeah,
rather
definitely.
than actually maybe more manual. Maybe that's more of a youth game.
Yeah, it's interesting to kind of take that as perspective, isn't it? And have a look at actually who is it that's working in the industry and what is it that they're visioning. Like you say, we speak about almost, I guess, hospitality. I worked in hospitality when I was at university, so that's where everyone worked in hospitality. Yeah. But when you leave university, you're kind of thrown into the corporate world, aren't you? And there you have, you'll gain a mentor, role models, and suddenly you start to kind of take these progressive steps because. Yeah. Like you say, your vision starts being, right, what is the next step for my career? What is it that I would like to develop into? And like I say, gaining those key skills that makes you climb the ladder ultimately, isn't it?
And I think you've got a very short window of time with a new generation of employees, right, to assert or communicate or embed with them a culture or expectation of what they should be looking at with you. So actually, I can be really impressionable. I could be, 21, coming into the company. I can say, we value the people who stay here 20 years and more. We celebrate them. Yeah. So the idea is, if you like it here and you think it works for you, you dig in and you follow that route. Here's your Marks, here's your Janets, here's your Sarahs. These are the people that have driven the business for 20 years, and that's who we celebrate. If that's what you like and you like our company, we'll put you through that path. I think it's up to the business to assert that culture, to support people to feel like they're on a path to do that.
Yeah.
If you don't, if you're like, no, we like it, we're young, we're vibrant, but it doesn't mean we probably don't think you'll be here for more than 3 years, that's fine, but we've got to communicate that.
Yeah, and on that point of communication, one idea that's kind of come to mind is that the fact that even if someone's with the company 2-3 years, not to leave on a kind of that sour patch, because even if you've been with the company 2-3 years and they've helped you grow and develop, and the business has invested in you, there's always the opportunity to then come back for a number of years. And I think that's the point, that even if people chop and change, it should never mean that they leave that business at that kind of blank of that point. It's not a hard stop, basically. And I think that's the way that the world works now. We are very fast flowing, and the world of work is it's chopping and changing all the time. It's different challenges. But actually, I think what's important is that we're using that to our benefit. So if you have new people come into the business, what skills can they be bringing? What other ideas do they bring? We say fresh blood, basically, don't we? And if they leave, it shouldn't be taken almost personally, if I can say that, to the business, because they could then come back even more developed and add more value. So it's kind of a bit more awareness of what this actually could mean for your business, what is important to your business, like you say, because don't forget the people that have been there 20 years and grown with the business and see all the development, because at the end of the day, I guess that's loyalty, isn't it? That's where they've invested their time and effort into your business.
Absolutely.
And built that loyalty. But then on the flip side, you might have the younger generation where they're coming in and they're chopping and changing, but actually they're bringing innovation and sustainability.
Sometimes it's the change you drastically need. Right?
Yes,
and that's not a criticism on what you have already incumbent. It's just going, well, the world is changing. These are new, fresh people. What can we learn from them? Because the experience runs both ways. The lessons work both ways.
Definitely. And one thing that's mentioned in this article I think is interesting is actually for the employees in growing in the businesses, is considering what transferable skills they have that they can take from their old job into new jobs and even into new career paths. And I think that's probably what is vital. It's not just kind of it's not just developing your skills in a really niche, which does work for some people, but ultimately I think the value is what transferable skills do you have in the company. And that doesn't mean that that employee might transfer out of the company. They might transfer internally and really succeed in a new role.
And that's something I think is different to how it maybe been a few years ago, because I think I remember being in very much I've gone to school, I've gone to university, I've learnt in this thing, so that's now the thing that I have to do, and I'm not qualified to do anything else, and I'm not going to get hired because everyone else will be better at me in those different things. This company is very good at encouraging internal movement, isn't it? Because we want people who know the business and enjoy the business and are passionate about the business. So there's loads of great opportunities there here to do that, and I think that's what other companies should do really well, is going, well, actually, it's never too late to educate yourself. It's never too late to learn or try on new challenges. And I think people expect that more now than they have done in previous years.
Definitely. So the ultimate question that we come back to, Andy, is career stability a thing of the past?
Yeah, but maybe that's not as bad as it sounds.
I think that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. Definitely. What do you guys think?
Let us know.
Yeah.
Let us know.
Do it soon, though. We might not be here. Who knows? I think that's a really good discussion. I like that. I think it's too big to discuss just now, but I think it's great that we've had this starting point, and hopefully people will get back to us with what they think about it.
I hope so. But on that point, I think what would be interesting to hear is how people actually are approaching their careers. Do they feel like their careers are stable?
Yeah.
Or does it feel like there are these kind of external threats? So I think we've almost touched the very surface of this discussion, haven't we?
Yep.
That's how I feel about it. But hopefully you've enjoyed listening today, and we have plenty of more podcasts coming later this year, so we hope to see you soon.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.